And we're live. Good evening, anybody who might be watching the stream. Welcome to the stream. I've got a feeling that the stream just restarted at Twitch's end, so I hope it's not going to be another night of restarts. But in the meantime, we shall get on with things. I'm just about to change the tip on this particular replaceable tip pen. Got another new tip here that I want to try at some point, another shader. So rather than switch out the one that I've got already in a pen, I am just going to use this one now. I've always been a little bit wary of this pen here because these two wires were rather close to each other. So having just slid them apart a little bit there. So I don't particularly like replaceable tip pens that much. Got to make sure I get a real good contact here, but when you want to try them out, they're really, really good for that perspective. And now I'm trying to hold this in place while I tighten this screw up, and of course Murphy's Law says it's going to go all over the place. Now although these are tight, they move really easily, so it's one reason why I'm not so keen on replaceable tip pens. So I'm just going to put this wire tip that I had in away into a tube, which is where I store the pens, and just put them to one side. Oops, being careful not to knock my keyboard all over the place. So this evening I'm going to carry on and do some more work on this particular pussycat here, on Felix. We got most of his body done actually, and as I mentioned on the stream last night, it was touch and go whether I actually abandoned this on Monday, but it seems to be working quite well now, so I'm going to keep it for a while. So let's turn the pyro on. That's mains, that's the machine, and we've now got a hot tip. So I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to get rid of the hair for a start. Right, I need roughly to do the body of the pussycat. Comes down here, so that's something I can do by hand. I want to be careful a little bit of this line here. This line is a pencil, and if I'm not careful I can cook that into the image, and I don't really want to do that because then it's there for all time. I don't actually want a dark grey edge there. Also got the ears to do, so I might actually do the ears first. Seems like a good idea. Yeah, let's have a go at doing the ears first. So ear hair is on the outside, is really tiny hairs, and they're really silky and smooth. And the inside edge of the ear here is quite shiny and smooth. We'll come back and do the inside afterwards, I think, so we'll just start with on the outside little tiny marks. In order to just create what is a fairly smooth but rough outline. Sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, that, a smooth rough outline. But what I'm really after is not a dead straight line. They are hairs, of course, and being hairs, they stick out a little bit and have slightly different shapes. It's not a dead straight line like a ruler. So I just want to make it as though they are hairs, is really what I'm trying to say, and that means not a ruler straight line. Now I am texturing these here, just like I've done the body, but I say a little tiny, sorry, the head, little tiny hairs, so I'm making little tiny texture marks. So that it looks natural. Now the hair direction will kind of change as we come down the ear to being more horizontal as we get closer to the bottom of the ear. Whereas right at the tip it's sort of vertical-ish, or moving, you know, straight up from the tip. But there isn't a great deal of the ear visible here in order to show that, so it won't be particularly a problem or look particularly unrealistic if they're not exactly correct. So I'm able to not have to worry about it really on the ear here, sort of being able to skip it, so to speak. A little bit of a trick, since it's not particularly visible, doesn't really matter if it's not quite right. And I shall leave it up to you to decide in your own mind whether what I've done is quite right or not. Working my way down the ear, shouldn't take too long to do. Again, both on the inner ear here we kind of have a more straighter edge because we're looking at the base of the hair rather than the end of the hair. The end of the hair, there's no consistent actual length, you know, they don't suddenly go, oh, I'm 2 millimeters long, I must stop dead. They do of course just grow as long as they want to grow and get worn down or nibbled off by the cat, or otherwise broken. Hair, you know, just reaches the length it reaches, but where it starts from has to be sort of the hair follicle, and and so the hair at that point is quite defined as to exactly where it starts, so to speak. Now, you know, they're on the back of the ear. The hair doesn't sort of curl around the ear or anything like that. It doesn't come out from the front edge of the ear. So we do have quite a, not exactly a ruler straight line on the front, but we do have a line which is reasonably consistent compared with elsewhere. There are some hairs inside the cat's ear, but we'll be adding those later. We'll probably be adding them actually by taking away colour, by scraping with something like a scalpel, sharp knife, so that they stand out from a coloured background. They're not actually brown, they're kind of a grey white hair as well on the inside of the ears, so that will also you know, be useful, because when we scrape the colour away we will actually be leaving what looks like a grey white line behind, as you might see on Junie here, where the whiskers kind of look like a greyish sort of line. You can see them in the ears as well, same thing, as we'll be doing that with Felix here. So anybody who's new to the stream, you might be wondering just what this is called, especially if you didn't read the title, but it is pyrography, the appliance of science. Pyrography, the art of creating images using heat. That's kind of a practical translation of what pyrography is, but a more literal translation is writing with fire. Pyro is fire, and the graphy is writing. But in actual fact, well, apart from it being fairly obvious I'm not writing, the actual fact is we're not using fire at all. We're not burning wood, although pyrography does often get called wood burning. But we're not burning wood. We're actually not even, the tool isn't really even hot enough to do that. The best I can probably do with this tool is to create a charcoal effect. Or in actual fact it is charcoal that we create, carbonising the wood and creating a very dark charcoal substance. What we're actually doing at this moment in time is more causing a liquid that's inside the wood fibre to leak out of the fibre, and then we are cooking it. Cooking it turns it a dark brown. It's a process which is kind of similar to the way which maple syrup is made, if you're familiar with that, where a tree is tapped for its sap, and then that sap is heated and cooked, and it goes that golden brown of maple syrup, and then tastes nice apparently. Never had any myself, and I've never tasted this either to see if it tastes nice. I doubt it, but I couldn't actually say for certain. So it's more a case of painting with the cooked internal liquid of the wood itself, because that's what's happening, is that this liquid then settles on the surface of the wood and sticks there, and it solidifies as soon as the heat goes away, and it's a bit like a varnish or gloss on the surface. Pyrography itself takes many forms and can be done on many substances. Just some of the more common are leather and gourds, but it can be done on other things as well. Less common would be bone and paper, although paper is quite difficult unless you're talking about very thick paper, card, and quite a few other potentially organic substances. I guess you could do it on things like large nuts, that sort of thing. Now, it has in the past been done on ivory as well, where it tended, or as far as I'm aware, it got called scrimshaw in that particular case. But of course ivory is a prescribed substance these days. There is bans on buying and selling and transporting of ivory. It's not used these days for anything, never mind pyrography. And the older art form of it was generally practiced a lot by sailors, who would do it using a heated sail needle, which they heated in a little tiny gas spirit burner, and then drew their images onto the ivory. Pyrography can be done with flame. There are some really excellent artists that do it using a blowtorch, and they're generally working on very large pieces of wood, and they will actually be creating fire. The wood will set on fire, but that's, you know, the control of that is part of the art form. The type of wood has an impact on pyrography as well, and the image. Different woods work in or react in different ways to having the heat applied, and different woods are better for some images than others. This particular wood that I'm working with here is birch plywood. It's the birch bit that's important in terms of the image. The plywood has another impact as well. But birch plywood is very good because it's a very light wood, has quite a close grain. There's very little difference in tone between the grain or the rings and the bits in between them, and there is also very little difference in how the wood reacts between the rings and the space between them, which makes it an excellent material for pyrography. Some other common lighter woods like pine, for example, the grain bit itself, or the ring, is relatively hard, whereas the material between it is relatively soft, and they react, or they don't produce the same colour for the same stroke. So if I were to run a pen at a steady pace across a piece of pine, the ring area or the grain would be a lighter colour than the area between. So it's something initial factor you have to control. And also with material like pine, the area between the rings shrinks away from the heat more than the ring or the grain area. Again, that creates ridges. It's something you have to control if it's important to the image that you're doing. The colour of the wood matters. If I was to take something like ebony, which is a really almost a black wood, then I would have to actually make a really dark mark on the wood for it to be visible. If I did a very light mark, you just wouldn't see it, neither would I. So the range of shades of colour that I'd be able to get on ebony would be very few. Possibly at most even one, maybe possibly two, but very, very few. If I take a mid-coloured piece of wood, something like hardboard, for example, which is a sort of a manufactured wood or manufactured board, then it's about halfway. It's sort of this sort of colour here. So I've got, I can maybe get 5 or 6 shades on that. So the wood, as the wood's got lighter, I've got the ability to create more shades. So here, which is birch, as I mentioned earlier, gives me even more range, and poplar is another very white wood, which should give me even more range of colours or shades of colour. And 3D blog, thank you very much for the host. I'm assuming that you're watching. Good evening. I kind of missed you all week. I guess you've not been streaming, but if you're around, welcome back. I mentioned this being plywood. One of the useful things about plywood is that it's manufactured. It's manufactured out of plies of wood, or thin sheets of the wood, which are then stuck together. But they're actually stuck together in a particular way, and what that results in is, with pyrography, especially when you're creating a large image like this, the wood shrinks, and as it shrinks it will tend to warp. And a piece like this, if it was a solid piece of wood, I'd expect to bow quite a bit. But the way in which the plywood is constructed means that the other plies resist that warping, because they're not being heated and shrunk, so they actually keep the piece a lot more flatter than it would have done. And indeed, although this one is slightly warped, it's not very, not significantly warped at all. And this other one here, again, is only very slightly warped in slightly different direction, but that really is, not significant at all. It's almost flat. So plywood makes a plywood makes a really good material for pyrography. Can do it on solid wood though, and obviously a great big thick chunky piece of wood isn't going to warp. It is often used as well as pyrography to colour sculptures and other 3D carvings that are made. For example, some animal carvers who will use pyrography on things like birds, for example, to create feathers in the fur, and they'll either use the colouring effect or sometimes actually the ability of a pyrographic tool with a sharp knife, a heated sharp knife basically, to actually enhance the carving by creating textures in the actual material. So it isn't always just used for creating brown marks. And indeed, this tool, if I change it, I can put a knife on the end, which is then heated. I can use that to cut plastic. Mylar it will cut, so I can create painting stencils, for example. I can actually also, with a tool like this, for example, use it for smoothing what would be called thermoplastics, but the sort of plastic which is used for 3D printing, for example, especially the lower temperature materials. Rather not, this is still approaching something like 200 degrees, which is hotter than those materials are exuded at. So they can be used for things like repair or smoothing off the surface of a 3D print. So it's not only used for creating images. It can be used as well for, well, it isn't really used as much, but for cutting gourds, for example. You can even cut pumpkins with it, but that's not really an ideal use of it. Oh, is it still? I had it. I noticed my stream restarted earlier, very soon after I started. I had to restart, but it then worked okay. I can. I'm broadcasting through the London Ingest again, and maybe you will have to then try another Ingest server tomorrow, perhaps. So how have you been? Well, I haven't actually seen you in any streams. So yes, you've been successfully lurking for the past few days. You've been somewhat hidden. I was kind of wondering if something had happened to you. So I trust you are okay. Obviously you don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But I've been finishing my stream at 10 o'clock and then going, oh, where's Free gone? It was almost as though all the streamers have gone on holiday. I don't think Chris has been streaming either. That anybody who's listening, that's a streamer called See What Happens. He streams. He's making a model of Mega Man using pipe cleaners. And he's also got models of a giraffe and a dog made the same way. They're freestanding, and by models I mean sort of 5-6 feet tall models. So they're not small. They're made out of very flexible pipe cleaners. Amazing modelling, and if you're not familiar with 3D Bloke, who was just said hello in stream a moment ago, he's an airbrush artist, a very excellent one, who's been doing quite a lot of work, just recently doing quite a bit of monochrome airbrush work, which is actually something that I find very fascinating. It's one of my favourite types of airbrushing. I'm not as good at it as 3D Bloke is, so I'd encourage you, when he decides he wants to stream again, to take a look at him. He'll usually, when he is streaming, be around 10 PM UK time. Okay, no, it's alright. You were missed, you see. I haven't got the space to do my own airbrushing at the moment, so like watching somebody else do it. Get a vicarious sort of airbrushing experience. Okay, I'm doing the ear of the cat here. Now I'm not outlining the ear, even though it kind of looks like that, but the very front edge of the ear, which is the edge of the skin basically, is smooth. It doesn't have hair right on the edge, and if you may or may not be able to see it in the reference image, but it's kind of quite a very almost a shiny edge, and that's just what I'm putting in here. The fact that it happens to outline the ear is a kind of secondary but very useful thing. And we've got the same on the other side as well, and if you were able to see the reference image, there is a very small area just on the edge of the ear, even on the inside, which has got a really dark skin pigment as well, and then it gets lighter, does the pigment, as you go into the ear, and obviously down into the ear canal where it's quite light. Although it does have the very convenient effect, as I say, of outlining the ear. This particular piece has been quite odd. When I started it, I generally start pieces, I will apply a layer of colour, and it's generally a light colour or a light shade of the colour that gets applied, and then I'll go over it and make it dark. I'll go over the whole piece, making the darker bits darker, and then go over again, making the darker bits even darker, and so I build up the shading in layers, starting from the lightest going darker. But when I started this piece last week, and I'd done the first pass more or less around the nose area, it really did not look right. I spent quite a few days, I'll describe it as playing with the shading, trying to just make it look right to my own eyes. And at the beginning of this week on Monday, on Monday, at the end of the stream I decided to actually abandon the piece and start again. I'd spent quite some time scraping and cleaning and removing colour and changing things around, just trying to get something which looked correct to me. And at one time this image looked like a fox and then a bear, and after the stream on Monday, I was watching another stream, and whilst I was watching another stream, I was kind of just playing with this, not really taking a lot of notice about what I was doing. I was intending to throw it in the bin, so I was just sort of practicing on it, so to speak. And I started applying a second layer of colour. And as I did that, it started to look better, which was weird to some extent, as to why a darker set of colour should make it look better and more like the image it was trying to represent. And so I actually gave it another chance, and I carried on then on Tuesday and later on yesterday's stream, adding the colour and making it all darker on just the face area here, and it's turned out then to be somewhat quite, I won't say the best, but it's to quite a good level of accuracy and looking like the thing it's supposed to look like. So I'm not quite sure what it is about it, but the colour and a similar but not quite as extreme thing happened when I did Junior here. It looked alright, but the light colour on the first pass made it difficult to see where certain things should be, and what colour the lighter white shading should be as well. And so and then I did the same thing with that. I darkened the fur area, and it came alive, so to speak, did the work, and I was able to progress it. This one's kind of done the same thing, but in a more extreme way. Don't quite know what it is, or why that occurred. It's certainly the lighter colour made it really difficult to see the image as being correct. But anyway, have to see when I do another one whether we've got the same thing happens again. I do at some point have another pussycat to do. These are a triple pair. Can I have a triple pair? That would be 6, and there aren't 6. There's 3 cats, and Junior, Felix, and there's Cleo. Cleo's more of a tortoise shell type cat rather than black and white. So that one could be more challenging, or could be easier, because the patching means I don't have to be as consistent in colour, and I don't actually want to be consistent in colour because obviously the different patches are different colours. Right, we've outlined the ears. I now make an attempt to ruin them by going inside and shading them. That's kind of a joke, but it would be easy to make the whole thing a mess up if I don't do the inside of the ears right. The rest of the body's easier because it's just fur, but the inside of the ears isn't. It's got no fur, and it's got a structure. Not a lot. In fact, Felix's ears are probably easier than Junior's were. He's really just a nice dark coffee brown inside. Okay, well, let's have a go. Dark coffee brown in the centres, and a lighter, I'll get my words out. A dark coffee brown in the centre of the inside of the ears, and then it fades to a really dark colour right against the edge on both of them. Okay, well, this ear I know looks wider, this edge, so we'll make this edge darker to start with. Now this is establishing really what this really dark edge is going to look like. It's not going to be any darker than this, so the rest of it has got to be lighter. So effectively what I'm saying is this colour is black, and everything else then references off of this. Now you can't see it, but where I've brought this line up to the edge of the fur here, there's actually a little tiny white area because that was the edge of the fur. So what I've just got to do is just go over this with creating extending the fur texture just over the edge of where it was before and into this area of the ear, so that it makes the ear look like it's part of the head, not something stuck on the outside. Or sometimes the way that cats rotate their ears around like radar receivers, you kind of wonder whether their ears are actually attached in or on some sort of swivel. If anybody's watching in stream and doesn't know what they're seeing or would like to ask any questions, feel free to just say so in stream, ask the questions. I don't mind. I am not an expert and I'm not a professional either, but I have been doing pyrography now for about 200 hours, which possibly sounds a great deal, but is actually the equivalent of about 10 pieces, and you can see 2 of them here. In fact, about 30 of those hours have been on streams, so but I will quite happily try and answer any questions that anybody may have about the art form or the tools in use. They are electrically heated tools, are these. These have been designed with art in mind, so creating images or of some kind. There are pyrographic tools which operate more like a brand, can also be used for art extensively, but they heat the tool at the end in a slightly different way, and generally speaking they get used by the people who have them in a different way, either by creating stamps or generally more of a cartoon style of art of the art form. But having said which, these can be used in exactly the same way to create a cartoon. Don't have stamps generally with these, but you can mimic that. And I say you can do cartoon style work with this very easily. The difference is, generally speaking, is this sort of tool is held like a pen and is heated at very low voltage, and the heat is created right at the tip here. The other type, which generally looks like a soldering iron, if you're familiar with a soldering iron, also uses mains, but it heats a heating element inside a silver barrel which is on the front of the tool, and the handle is usually quite chunky, and the heat is then conducted down to the tip, which is replaceable screws in and out at the end. Both do the job. Depending on the type of work you do, some are, that works better than this, or in some cases this will work better than that. So it's one of these things that the tool is to suit the task that you're trying to use it for. Okay, so I'm going to be sort of doing this in layers. So I'll add some colour. I will probably then make it darker, and then and make it darker and so on until I get to what I like, what I want the ear to look like. Doing it in stages or in layers means that if I make a mistake, it's more easy to correct than it would be if I just tried to make this go as dark, as black as I could, and if I do that and I put the tool in the wrong place and create a dark mark, then I've got to start trying to correct it, scrape it, or somehow fix it. Whereas if I make a lighter mark and it's not quite in the right place, I can either go, well, it's really hard to see, so I won't bother, or correcting it by using any of the erasing techniques. There's less surface disruption and therefore I'm more likely to successfully reapply colour afterwards. Now if you're on the stream at the start, you'll have seen me actually change the tips on one of the pens. I've got two pens that have replaceable tips like this, and I changed the tip on my other one earlier on to a larger shader than I've got, which I want to try out. Just a similar idea to this. It's just a bit. In fact, I'll show you. It's just a bigger tip, which means you can, in theory, heat more of the wood in one go. I may be better. I was thinking of using this for the background. I may be successful. I may make a mess of it. We shall find out probably together. Okay, so the front edge of the ear around here looks quite dark, and down here looks quite dark. So the colour I'm putting on at the moment isn't dark enough for what I want it to look like, but it is dark enough for the first pass. This whole of the inner area of the ear wants to be darker, but what I'm going to do is by applying dark here and dark here, then I'll go over the whole ear. So this will get darker and this will get a little dark, this will get darker, and I can keep doing that. I maintain the contrast then between the pieces of colour that I've put into the ear. Now the ear itself is dark enough that you can't really see any structure even when I come to do this one. You can almost, the structure that's in it is almost invisible. Sort of in Junior's ear here, you could see some reflected highlights and dark areas, maybe not showing up too well on the strip. There you go. You can see the highlight areas and the darker patches that were visible there, sort of the inner folds of the ear, like your own ear has folds which are there to direct the sound into the ear canal. On Felix here, they're almost invisible. It's just like a dark shell. Which from an artistic point of view is A, easier to do, but B, less interesting. So we've mainly got that, and this is and the other useful thing, relatively speaking, about the Felix having such dark ears is that if I do make a mistake, I can just make the whole ear dark, and unless you have the reference image that I'm using and trying to get somewhat like, you wouldn't actually know. So I can hide the mistake by not telling you it's a mistake. Okay, so what we'll now do is just make this darker, and I do that just by moving the tool over the whole area. Naosi, thank you very much for following. That's most kind of you. I thank you very much. I am glad that this is proving interesting enough for you to want to come back and see what's going on next time. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. For anybody that is watching, and if you haven't seen the profile page on Twitch, you may not be aware that pyrography is just one of the things that I do on stream. I also carve or do relief carving, and I also do scraper board, which is again a monochrome art form, where we have a black board. That's not a black board, that's a board that's black, where we use a sharp implement to scrape, revealing white underneath, and we create images from that by scraping in different ways. And the relief carving is done using hand tools and rather than power tools. And relief carving is carving an image out of a flat board, so you carve into it to reveal the image, so it's not a three-dimensional sculpture, it's kind of 2.5D sculpture. Now, as I say, I'm just trying to make this darker, but I'm also trying to make it a fairly consistent colour. I don't want dark lines to appear, and it is surprisingly takes a little bit of skill to just keep making it darker without actually suddenly creating a really dark spot on the wood. As I mentioned earlier, it wouldn't necessarily be particularly damaging to the piece, but this is also about developing the skills of handling the tool and the wood, and getting better at it. So I don't want to necessarily set out to make mistakes. In fact, I obviously want to set out to try and do what I intend to do. So I'm controlling the tool isn't controlling me, which means that I'm setting out to do this in stages and shade it in stages. So I actually want to do that rather than have to just correct a sudden dark spot that I've created because I wasn't paying attention or didn't have the control that I thought I had. Unfortunately, this can sometimes look somewhat boring, I guess, because you won't actually really be seeing much of a change each time, because it's a relatively, just one shade of change will probably not be picked up too well by the camera. If you were watching it in a time lapse, then you'd probably see it, but because it's happening relatively slowly, what you'll see kind of is you'll have seen the process, but it'll just suddenly at the end of it just be dark, and you kind of won't necessarily have seen it get there. Bit of a weird effect, I know, but you suddenly realise that it has got dark. And this to some extent is one of the I'll quote it as the dangerous points in doing something like this, because it would be relatively easy to become impatient and want this to go more quicker than it actually is doing at the moment. And of course that's, as I mentioned, is being impatient is when mistakes can happen more easily, and then you don't get the effect that you were after, and correcting it takes longer than it would have done to do it the patient way in the first place. You can also get areas of the wood which will take a colour to start with, which is having that a little bit around here. They've taken a colour to start with, and as you go back over and try and darken that colour, I won't say they resist it, but they don't actually, it doesn't build up as quickly as you might expect it to. Don't particularly understand why myself at the moment. Obviously it has something to do with the available liquid that's within the wood fibres, but I'm not sure of the exact mechanism as to why that should be. Okay, now to get this darker I can do one of two things, or to get it darker or to apply colour in the first place. I can do one of two things. I can either turn the heat up, or I can move the tool more slowly. Either apply more heat to a particular spot. The more heat there is, the more quickly it will turn a darker shade. I tend to prefer moving the tool more slowly than turning up the heat. That is quite literally because I have more time. Time gives you control. If I turn the heat up to this tool to the point where just touching it to the piece of wood makes it go really dark black in about a quarter of a second, if I don't want it that dark, I've got less than a quarter of a second to get to the colour I want, and then to move or remove the tool. If I use a lower heat, so I have to hold it in place for 5 to 10 seconds, say, then I've got 5 to 10 seconds to see if I've got the colour I wanted and move the tool away. Hence there's just more control. The time gives you control, and makes it less likely you're going to get an inappropriate colour that you really didn't want. It is sometimes something that people who are new to any art form, pyrography being one of them, well, even carving has a similar sort of urge when you are new, airbrushing, and that is trying to do something fast, generally because it doesn't seem to be moving as fast as you want it to, and sometimes because quite often people who are new to the hobby have seen other people doing it. They've seen, experts who have had many years of practice, and they can handle the higher speeds. Or quite often, people who have seen, especially with things like pyrography, which take many hours, they'll have seen time lapse. And of course time-lapse fools you as to how long something takes. Just one stroke of this pen, which takes 8 to 10 seconds, is gone in a flash on a time-lapse. This whole ear, which may take 10-20 minutes to do, will be 10 or 15 seconds, and it's very easy to carry over the thought that that's how quickly you expect it to take when you're new to this, 10 to 15 seconds. And when it doesn't, you think you're doing something wrong and you turn up the heat, and then you do something wrong. So but even I've had quite a bit of practice now. I've said over 200 hours, and I'm still prone to that. One artist I love to watch on YouTube is Jean Bouick, Bouick. I encourage you, if you're interested in pyrography, to do a search for her and take a look at some of the work that she does. Animals and landscapes, she does some absolutely amazing representations in pyrography, and they're generally all time-lapse, and I still can be fooled by it. I will look at how quickly she would get colour, if you like, in this ear, and it looks very much like she does it in one pass, but the time lapse is fooling me, and I have to go and apply my limited experience to what I'm seeing and go, what I'm actually seeing is this took 5 minutes in practice, not the the 10 seconds it looks like from the video. Baby Tears, good evening. I trust you've unplugged your headphones this time. If you remember. And how are you? I hope the stream is okay for you. Twitch has been a bit odd these past few days, and some people have had problems with actually trying to watch, which isn't fun. Last time I think on the stream. It's alright. I'm going to tease you for a few times though. Dear. You may explain or keep it as a private joke if you like, Baby Tears. Yes, I did. No, I don't. As I said at the time, I don't mind. It was reasonable what was happening, so. I don't have a problem. It just I can just continue to have a little bit more of a giggle. What we've just done now is intrigue anybody else who's on stream as to quite what the private joke was, but not my place to say. There's one thing about pyrography, you can get some really rich brown colours, which are the sort of the dark coffee colour, really shiny brown, and that's I just find them really pleasing shades. Alternatively, sometimes you get something that looks like you've rubbed mud over it and it doesn't look. It looks like a really dirty piece of wood, but dear, that's just something that develops with time as the colour improves and your tonal control improves with practice. Then these nice rich colours come. Oh, Lizard Searle, good evening, sir. Oh, I don't think it would have made any difference whether any alcohol had been consumed at the time, but that made it a little bit easier. Oh dear, you're seeing a problem as well, Lizard. Okay, well tomorrow night then I will switch. I'll start again. I'm back using the London ingest. It does seem like a good idea to use a local ingest rather than one of the continental ones, but tomorrow I'll switch to one of the continental ingest servers. Daft as it sounds though, I'm wondering whether or not, I don't actually know where the continental ingest servers are. They're just as likely to all be in a data centre in London. Yeah, it does seem to be the European receivers that were have been having problems. UK especially, and it seems very much like it's either a problem for the web server that you connected to, or the stream server that you connected to, or that stream server connecting to the ingest to get the copy of the stream. Not quite sure, but because it almost seemed the other night to be related to the internet service provider that you had, I think we were seeing it on some streams, and myself and Lost in House have, I think, the same service provider. We weren't seeing a problem, but 3D Block, who's around now as well, he was, but he's on a different service provider. BT, Baby Tears. It's a BT Infinity link. So the Infinity itself is just the bandwidth, because all service providers providing that use the same thing. But so I've got, at the moment, I've got something like a 7 meg upload and about 60 meg down, I think. Oh. I could say I own them because I've got a few of their shares. Oh dear, living on an island. Well, I live on an island, Lizard Sill. Might be a bigger island, but it's an island. But it didn't seem, it didn't seem to be. I mean, what was it? It's Thursday today. On Tuesday, I couldn't even watch my own stream coming back at me. I don't know if you stream, your dashboard has, they call it a video preview, but it's not a preview because it's just literally what you guys are watching. I'm watching the same thing come back at me, and that I could not even watch it at all. It just it buffered it buffered for a second, would then stop for about 30 seconds while it tried to buffer enough to play, and then eventually it gave up altogether. Oh, that's not bad. Oh dear. I have enough. I mean, that's the main thing. I mean, it's all right, these headline figures, like I've just said, 7 megs up, 60 odd meg down. But that only matters, or is only of any use, if the rest of the internet that you're using to get wherever you're going actually matches it. And the server that you're talking to at the other end can actually spit it out at you at that sort of speed anyway. If it can't, then it don't matter how much. If the server you're talking to is on a 500 kilobit link, then that's all you're going to get. And the rest of your bandwidth is just sat there going, give us something to do, please. But it comes in useful. It's nice to be able to watch 4 or 5 HD streams all at the same time. Of course, if 3D's around, we've probably just upset him. I don't think he's getting quite that much on his link. I'm only broadcasting at 1.5 megs though, so I'm not using anything like the capacity of the link. And that, in case anybody's wondering, is just purely because because we're not partnered, we don't get what they call transcoders, which will allow people to watch the stream at different resolutions and different bandwidths. So I'm broadcasting at a rate which is should be acceptable to most systems that are trying to receive it, and hopefully won't be too bad for people who have bandwidth caps or limited download speeds. Yeah, it really would be nice to wave that wand. I'd quite like a gigabit either way, but I don't know what I'd do with it. I don't play any any critical online games where ping is important. So all the gigabit would be good for is just well, I can only fit so many HD streams on the 3 screens here anyway. A little bit of inattention there, and I made it a little bit darker than I want it to, so now all that means is that's what's, well, I was about to say that means that all the rest of the year has to go to at least that level and darker, but in actual fact I can cheat. Anybody who hasn't, as mentioned earlier, anybody who hasn't got access to the reference image doesn't know what it's supposed to be looking like, so I just say, well, that's what it looks like, and you have to believe me. Of course, I'm not telling you lies, because that is what it looks like. It's not what the cat looks like, and not what the reference image, but choose your words carefully. You can say anything you like. The art of, I'll call it the art of political statement. How to talk for hours and say nothing. Bubbles the Monkey, good evening, and how are you? Did you manage to get your sword done the other night? I didn't, can't remember last time I watched you done, or were doing the wings on the hilt, but you actually hadn't done the rest of the hilt and the pommel. So, but then I think I had to go to bed or something. I can't remember what, for some reason. Oh, I think maybe you went. Yeah, you might have to be careful, baby teaser. She starts wielding that sword around. It must be a magical sword. It's from Zelda. Okay. I'm better now that I've started streaming. Before I started the stream, I was sort of dropping asleep a little bit. I was watching somebody else do some pearling, beading, and I kind of couldn't keep my eyes open. I was in two minds whether to actually stream or not. But now that I've actually started and talking to you guys, I've woken up, which is really good. For two reasons. One is it's less of a boring stream to you guys than perhaps hearing me snore, and I don't burn myself with a hot tool. I'm sorry, Lizard. I really wish I could fix it. It's not much fun to watch a buffering stream. I know that. Twitch not notifying. I think you might have to actually explicitly say you want notifying. By the way, I noticed that that's now an option, shall we say, when you follow somebody. But if you want, there's you can, if you use Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter, and the only thing that gets tweeted out is the fact that the stream started. So at Zaragonart if you want. I went there. Good evening. Aye, kitty kipper. Well, the kitty might like a kipper, but spelt differently. Ah dear, that one's got big ears as well. That actually looks rather like this one. You've been stealing a picture of our Junior. It's very close to Junior in facial expression by the looks of it. Ah dear. Okay, this is now just going dark enough that it's starting to gloss. I have noticed that as I make things darker, there's a point at which it goes sort of all shiny as though it literally has been varnished. Probably the state of cooking of the actual liquid that does it, but it's quite a nice shiny mahogany colour. Now, I've created a light edge around this inner core here, kind of accidentally in a way, which I don't really want there, so I will now fill that area in with a colour. I'm not particularly bothered about so having some lighter and darker areas within the ear anyway, because as I mentioned earlier, you know it's just this is the inside of the cat's ear, so it's quite dark. If you can't see what's in there, then it doesn't matter. If you're seeing something and you're just assuming it's part of the inner ear structure, so without image to either the without access to either the cat or the reference images, then you don't actually know what's supposed to be there, and it will just look okay. So although I'm trying to create a nice smooth colour, I'm half succeeding, but it's you know it's not something that I am going to go crazy trying to make sure I get it right. I'm just using it, if you like, as to gain the experience, and if it goes right and I can make it look right, then that's good. If it doesn't quite look right to me but still looks okay, then I've learnt a little bit. Yeah, Twitch is really weird. It really is weird. I was about to say I have it the iOS app, and it chortles at me when some of my streams go live, and that seems to be fairly reliable. And I guess that's because the phone is actually every few seconds it's asking Twitch who's live. So that's probably more reliable than Twitch sending out the emails. But, yeah, so I kind of recommend, if you would like notifying and you do use Twitter, then maybe just follow me on there. I was about to say unfortunately I kind of don't really use Twitter a great deal myself. I do look at it from time to time, but I don't tweet very often. These, if you look at my timeline, you'll just see the tweets from Kitty Cat goes live. That's about it. Which does mean actually you won't be inundated by me. There are some tweeters. Yeah, that's the right pronoun by the sound of it. That tweet absolutely everything that they do. Fortunately, I'm not one of them. Am I going to be streaming long? Actually, for about another hour, baby tears. Maybe, yeah, maybe. Well, it's 9:15 where I am here now. Maybe to 10:30, but somewhere between 10 and 10:30. I'll almost certainly be stopping. Really, just depends on if I'm where I am in the piece. If there's just a little bit left to finish, then something, then I'll maybe extend it to do that. But there again, if for example Free starts streaming again tonight, then I may well finish on time. Don't really know at this stage, I'm afraid. I am wondering if that ear is okay as it now. I think it probably wants to be darker, because one thing is it's going to get compared against Junior here, and Junior's ears, which are as black as Felix's, so I probably want to make them similar in terms of what it looks like in these two plaques. These areas here are kind of glossing off. It's almost like a glassy surface, and as I'm doing this, it kind of looks like to me is I am moving around like a little bit of a liquid surface as I do it, which of course is consistent with what is of how the colour is created, and it being like a varnish on the top, and the pen heating up that varnish that's being created is then able to push it around. So I'm using as much of the flat of this tool as I can, because that will create that smooth surface, which hopefully makes a better representation of the inside of the ear. One of the happenstances, or one of the purely coincidental things that's being created here, is there's a lighter edge just around the ear edge here, which just makes it look like it's reflecting light. It's a highlight. Pure coincidence, but I will accept it being there. And if anybody else asks me, it was done on purpose, just to achieve this highlight. You guys know the secret. It just happened, and I am claiming it as a success. We're in the same time zone, baby tears, which of course seems reasonable. Yep, thank you very much. That's not a problem. Look forward to hearing you again. And of course, I trust very much that you will have a stream that you can hear. Don't worry, I'll stop soon. Okay, so I've done the darker edge, and now I'll do the inner of the ear. Kinda want them to be. Yeah, okay, so what I'm going to do now is, now that I've sort of created most of the dark area, I'm now going to start moving the tool in an arc, in a curve, which is kind of the angle of the inside of the, it's not quite, but it's a curve, and whilst there isn't a great deal of texture because I'm using this tool flat, there will be a slight what's the word I'm looking for? A very slight impression, shall we say, of the fact that it's curved. So if I do create any slight edges or slight marks, those marks will be in a curved pattern, which is what the inside of the ear is it's a curve. So whilst I'm not expecting them to be there, if they do appear, then it will be consistent with the image that you're looking at. Moving the tool in the direction of the surface or whatever it is that you're representing, and you get a better result. So again, a relatively slow way of doing it, but creating it in such a way that I can control it. Now as I do this, I can just see the slight differences in shades, so I know it's happening. But even to me, this is really subtle. I'm just kind of very conscious of the fact that if I try and do this too slow, move this too slowly, then I will actually create dark spots that I don't want necessarily to create. I want it to be a fairly uniform colour. And ow, that's getting quite warm. Just occasionally, these pens are really good. These are heavy duty pens. The razor tip system comes with heavy duty pens and light duty pens. The heavy duty pens are basically thicker, so they've got a bit of a stronger construction, I guess, and they've got a grip here which is also thicker. So you can see the difference there. This is a standard duty pen, this is a heavy duty pen in this hand. So the difference is these stay cooler a lot for a lot longer. In fact, they really don't get hot at all. The standard ones do after about an hour or so of continuous use. They get a bit warm. They just a case of switching them off for 5 minutes and the body then cools down, but these don't ever seem to get really particularly warm at all. I can use these all day. They are a little bit more expensive though, but there is heat that comes up on the outside, so some angles of this mean that my fingers are in the stream of hot air coming up off the tip, and it gets a little uncomfortable, shall we say. I don't actually burn myself, but it's that sort of this stings a bit, and of course you'd move away from whatever heat source you were getting that from, and it's kind of, I go ow, but I'm not actually burning myself. It's just that shorthand to yourself, which is should move fingers before I do burn. Okay, that's coming, might want that a bit darker, but otherwise that's coming along quite nicely. A slight variation in colour, not a problem as I mentioned earlier, because there is structure in the ear. It's very dark in there. In the reference images, there's not a lot to see, but it's not unexpected to see some sort of structure in an ear, so it doesn't look out of place or look wrong. It's quite amazing sometimes how an expectation of what you should be seeing leads you into thinking that you can, or alternatively can't, see what it is that you're expecting. You know, brain can do amazing things. I mean, as an example, as I mentioned earlier, 3D bloke who is an airbrush artist, and he's on the stream, and if you're not familiar with 3D blog, I recommend you take a look at his streams when he goes live, or if he goes live. And he recently completed a monochrome Darth Vader helmet. Now monochrome means a single colour, and it was actually done as using white paint on a black background. Now technically I know 3 did actually use two colours, he used black and white, but the black was just used like an eraser, for want of a better description. But the Darth Vader helmet basically predominantly done, or almost exclusively done, with white paint. But if you can get him to show you the canvas, you will swear that the white paint is black. It looks black, but it's white. Your brain is fooling you, or your brain is fooling your perception. It's a weird thing, but it's what makes that image work. Weird but fascinating things that your brain does with colour. And of course, not mentioning that dress, which I saw as black and white, by the way, in case anybody was interested. I never saw the blue until I actually was able to see it in a different context, and then I saw it. Okay, I think we shall leave the... I was about to say I think we should leave that here. I think it probably wants to be darker still, but I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to do a little bit of this here. This here. There's a bit of colloquial English. God, I can't even say that. So we got a nice coffee coloured interior, but really just lots of, just from the edge it's dark. Okay, so the darkness kind of comes from the outside edge of the ear inwards. Kind of organically creeping in almost. It's oops, a daisy. Just picked up a hair. It is hot enough actually to burn hair, is this, or to frizzle it, shall we say, and you then do get the characteristic smell of burnt hair. In this particular case, the hair it was burning was a pussycat fur hair. Both of these cats do regularly visit the studio here. Sometimes they'll appear on stream, and they do quite like to leave their hair around on the studio desk here, which when it gets on the pen does go up in smoke, and it's not a fantastically pleasant smell, to be honest. The smell of the heated wood is definitely a lot nicer. All I'm doing here is just working my way, or will be working my way, from the ear edge inwards. You must remember to keep following the angle of the curve of the ear, which I almost was forgetting there. And I'll just be building up the colour. It's lighter on the inside, but it's still quite a dark light, if you see what I mean. It's lighter than the edge, but it's still very dark. So there's quite a way to go, but this is the inside is that lovely dark coffee colour. The outside edges on both sides here are almost black. I won't be going that dark. but I will see just how dark I can get it, or in respect of, again, I'm saying as dark as I can get it. I can carbonize it, but I'm not going to, so I'll stop at a point where I think it looks reasonable. One of the nice things about the technique here of coming in from the outside edge is the inner side here is sort of smoothed or feathered out almost automatically. I'm not creating a hard solid edge, I'm creating a soft edge, which is very good for the image that I'm creating here. It just fades out. And because on an organic image like a person or an animal, there's very few hard edges that you ever come across. They're generally curves, and any sort of colouring is always soft and subtly merged. Even when you look at the edge of fur, it's not a really hard line. The white and the dark hairs merge together for a little while and create a soft edge to the changing fur. Okay, quite liking this. It's darkening down quite nicely, but it's getting into a little bit of the muddy stage, which it seems to go through. When you start darkening wood like this, just as you start, it gets a very muddy colour. You then get a nice-ish brown, then it goes a little bit more muddy, and then you get to the nice rich browns. Just keep referring to my reference image while I'm doing this, just so that I can check that I am at least representing it in a way that I want to do. I'm not slavishly following the reference image. It's there just to guide me. So this isn't a perfect copy by any means. It's not intended to be. It's an interpretation of it. All it essentially did was provide me with a better idea of the placement of the eyes and nose and the main structure. And it helps to understand how light reflects off the fur, and where lighter or the highlights from the lighting should be positioned. Because sometimes they're in really weird positions, because light bounces around or reflects off stuff which is just outside the image, and then you have to be able to understand why they're there, so that you can look at it and go, actually that's reflecting off a glass that you can't see, therefore I don't actually want that highlight in there, because then people will look at it, and because they can't see the glass, it doesn't look right. But that just comes with practice. So if you haven't already heard it on the stream, you're looking at pyrography, and you've probably realised I'm creating this image using a heated tool. Although it's called burning wood, I'm not burning the wood. I'm kind of just cooking a bit of it, and the cooking effect turns the surface brown. I'm quite pleased with that, the effect that's coming on that ear edge there. So I've kind of learnt something, because I have never really tried to do that with ears before. So I've learnt a little bit. Now you may or not be able to see this. This edge around here appears to be taking colour really quickly. What it actually is this dark edge that I created, because that's where I'm starting from. And I mentioned it's a liquid. I'm pushing, or the heat of the pen is making that liquid, and I'm kind of pushing it away from the edge. So I'm kind of painting with the liquid that is already there, and in actual fact I've made the edge slightly lighter by doing that. Won't necessarily show up on the camera there, but I can see it in real life here. Something you notice when you're actually using the tools, and it can be used to effect sometimes, and other times it can be a bit of a nuisance. Especially if I wanted a really light edge, for example, a really light inner around there, I might have had difficulty with it because of this moving of the dark varnish, whatever you want to call the substance that's created here. But it is coming out really nicely, if I do say so myself, and I just did. Now there is hair to go into the edge of this ear, and the other one as well. The cats have... cats don't actually have much, if any, hair actually inside their ears. There is like a line of hairs which is just inside the edge, and they go across the opening of the ear. So they're kind of like bars of a fence or something like that. What I imagine them to be is like guard hairs. They're there probably to stop things flying into the cat's ears, which will be really sensitive, of course, because cats can hear quite well, and something buzzing around inside their ears, I can imagine, would not be very pleasant at all. Now those are lighter than the skin over which they go, so what I'm going to be doing is, rather than trying to leave little tiny white marks on here, which would be extremely challenging, shall we say, if not practically impossible to do, what I'm going to do is, once the piece is complete apart from these hairs, I will get a sharp knife out. I've got a scalpel with a sharp point, and I'll actually scratch away the colour, because the colour is just on the surface of the wood. So I will scratch away at it, and actually scratch it away and create a white track, which is the hair. I won't actually scratch it really hard, because I don't want pure white. I want sort of a lighter than the background, but not as white as the plain wood. With a fairly light scratch, I can create what looks like grey hairs in the ear, and then I've saved myself the trouble of trying to leave all those little tiny white lines. Now this colour here is building up and coming across closer to the centre of the ear really nicely. Don't intend to try and make it black, or even potentially much darker than this. This is quite a nice colour. It's being quite shiny and smooth looking, which is what the inside of the cat's ears do look like, quite shiny and smooth looking. So again, to those people that are familiar with it, it just adds to the realism of the image. Or at best, at worst, doesn't detract from the realism of the image. Okay, so that needs to come over. Again, I'm looking at the shapes. The inside area here is got to, go darker, but I'm going to try and maintain the colour shapes of the reference just to help keep the 3D looking image, 3D looking shapes that represent the ear. A little bit of a dark mark there, but not particularly a problem. Either it will sort of blend out over the next few minutes, or it will just ultimately look like a little bit of structure internal to the ear. And if anybody has any particular questions, of course, feel free to ask them. I can ramble on about what I'm doing, but if it's not answering the questions that you might have been in your mind, or you're just interested in the techniques or tools that you're seeing, feel free to ask. Felix doesn't bite at all, and neither do I. Junior's slightly different, but he's not around at the moment, so you are relatively safe. Okay, well, I'm now going to come back over to this side and do some more from this side, and then I'll gradually work into the centre, and this hopefully will turn out to be that quite nice coffee colour that I've got. Although this, whilst I'm getting a nice effect here, this side of the wood, not quite getting it reacting to the heat quite as easily as other bits. You often find this on wood. There'll be some which just for some reason takes a little bit more effort to get colour out of. A little bit of a darker area here at the bottom than just this edge, so just seeing if I can represent that. Just an area which is fairly smoothish looking, just inside of where the hair, the fur stops on the face towards the ear. It doesn't go all the way in, it sort of stops on the threshold of the ear. And this is quite a dark area. Now what I just want to be a little bit wary of is I don't actually want to iron or flatten out the texture. So I'm being quite light here with the tool. I won't say I'm hovering it over the surface, but because it is actually touching the surface, but I'm being very light so that I don't actually squash down the texture that's around here. I'm trying to make sure that I blend the textured area into the smooth area. So I have to go right up here into the textured area to make sure that the colour is seamless across and I don't end up with a white line, or at least a lighter coloured line. Nothing particularly regular about this in terms of straight lines or things like that, so again that's something to bear in mind when you're trying to do a piece like this. You don't really want any straight lines anywhere, and it's very easy to create one. I've kind of got one here, as you can see, so I'm probably just going to have to put some, what in 3D world is probably called greebles, just things that just represent complexity. It's really easy when moving the tool around in any sorts of direction to actually create an edge, and a fairly sharp edge. So it's just again one of those parts of the skill you have to develop, is to recognise that, and where it's not required. It is sometimes obviously like a building or a car, you'd want a straight clean edge, but generally on an organic thing like an animal or trees and plants, you don't have those really hard edges. It will be helped by the fact I'm going to make this darker and closer in shade. So again, it's not an absolute. Okay, I can concentrate too much on that if I'm not careful. I want the rest also to be coloured, so I'm now just going to try and extend this colour and extend this area a little bit to close in on this centre. Nice thing about pyrography, if you do it in stages like this, you can keep going over and just make it darker. It doesn't have to be done in one pass. Lizard Soul, welcome back. Oh, that's good. Maybe they fixed something, or that's nice. I am glad that you're getting a lag-free stream. You know, Murphy's Law says it would have happened in 9 minutes time, and in 10 minutes time I'd have stopped. So I'm glad you've got a chance to enjoy the stream without the lag. Now, when I did the other side, you saw this dark brown colour extend really easily out. This side, as I said before, isn't doing that quite as easily. It's taking, when I say taking effort, it's not like I'm pressing or forcing something where you're having to use a lot of muscle power, where you might think of effort. It's just concentration and maybe slower movement or multiple passes, so the effort is really just in overcoming it, not specifically sort of trying to force anything. in case anybody's wondering, this, it doesn't look like it takes effort, but to be honest, after a few hours of trying to do pyrography, it is quite tiring. There's a lot of concentration involved in creating any art form, and I know sometimes a lot of it can look really easy to do. Sometimes that's because it is, and other times because that's just the way that the people who have developed the skill can make it look. And it is surprising, even with things that look easy, just how tiring it can be. And of course, the other factor of how tiring something can be is just how much you're enjoying doing it. If you're enjoying doing it, you tend not to notice that effort quite so much. Gluten-free gamer, if you're on stream, thank you very much for hosting me. That's absolutely fantastic. If you are on stream, again, welcome. Maybe that it's automatic. For feeling that I saw you giving up for the night a few hours ago, so if that's the case, get off to bed. If you're still watching. Right. So those people who have joined through free game, gluten-free gamer, you may not have seen what this is pyrography. I know Gluten has mentioned me a few times on his stream, for which I thank him very much. And pyrography, the creating images with heat. I'm using an electrically heated tool on wood. Sometimes gets called wood burning, but I'm not actually burning the wood. It's more a case of cooking the sap that's in the wood to create a brown varnish, which is then sits on top of the wood. Those guys who are in my stream, who may not be familiar with gluten-free gaming, gluten-free gamer. Sorry, I'd encourage you to drop in on his stream when he goes live. If I recall correctly, he's over in the States, so there's quite a time difference to me. But he does all sorts of things. He's well into learning new art forms and things like that, and streaming that actual process. So it's great to learn alongside him. He does screen printing of t-shirts. He does 3D printing. He does artworks with markers and pens, and he does 3D design work using SketchUp and other tools, and I'm sure he does a lot more, but which I haven't yet seen, but I'm looking forward to seeing. So I do encourage you to take a look when he goes live, or even I'm assuming he does record it, so to take a look at some of the recorded highlights and things if he has them available. Now then, right, hold on. Just gradually building up the colour on here. It's a dark area. This centre area is the lightest area of the ear, but that in itself will be at least this dark when I've finished. Taking a little bit of work, just the nature of the wood, to get it to on this side of the ear to go dark. Right, and wood is a natural substance, so it's not perfectly consistent. Even though it looks the same, the two areas, it could just be a different, just because it's a different part of the tree. One might be closer to the core than the other when the wood was cut, that sort of thing. That can just affect just how the wood fibres react to the heat. And it's just one of those things that you just deal with as you're working on the piece. It essentially just means it takes either more passes or you have to slow down to create more colour, which effectively is just applying more heat without turning up the temperature of the tool. Again, I'm trying not to create hard edges, I want soft edges. There's very few hard edges around, and that would just make it look a little bit unnatural. But just around this area at the bottom of the ear here, I'm trying not to flatten the textures I've already got in place. So I'm just skating the tool over the top. Makes it a little bit harder to get colour because it's not as good a contact with the wood. But again, that's just a factor of time. So I move slower. The heat is in the same place for longer, and that therefore makes the wood hotter. Which is just the same as I'd get if I turn the tool up, but I have more time to control it. And by now you should have got the idea that I like the ability to control it and take my time. Now this outer edge of the ear here now is starting to get down to the colour that I'm looking for. And it is often kind of like a knock-on effect. As I've now got a bit down here, the rest of it seems to follow. It's not as though I'm preheating it or anything like that, which would make that more understandable. Obviously, just because I've been fairly consistent, I guess they all turn at roughly change colour at roughly the same time. Okay, sorry I've not noticed in chat. Lizard, let's have a look. Have you been? I very rarely use it. I have taken it off and adjusted it because essentially the difference between this tool and this tool is this takes a lot. I have to turn the control down, the main control down quite a lot, so I don't overheat this tool, get it too hot. So this one, the nature of the way it's used, etc., is turned up for the same level of heat. Best way of describing it, I said, oh, same level of effect. This one wants to be at least half the setting. Well, when I got this machine, I found that I had the temperature turned right down to level 1, and this was still too hot, so I did turn it down on that hidden control, as you put it, and that's allowed this to have a reasonable, I now have to turn the main control up to use this one, which gives me more of a range. This one does have to be turned up a little bit more, but I'm still nowhere near 10 or 11 if you understand the joke of turning it up to 11. Is it? It worked on mine. I don't know if it's. I mean, I've had mine about 3 years now. I mean, I can't. If it's there, I can't see why it wouldn't work, because I can't see the point in them fitting it if they were going to disable it, because that's kind of a waste of money to them. And manufacturers don't like putting components that they're not going to use. So you might want to check. Perhaps even contact Razortip and see if it actually is disabled, or there's some reason for it. I can't see why it shouldn't work. But I guess Italy maybe is a different. Yes, they do. There is a resistance between the wire and the contact, so you do lose a little bit of power and heat, if you like, in that level there. So one way is to make sure they are tight. But I've got this set at level 6. Is it? I wonder why. Oh, if it's removed altogether, then yeah, fair enough. The way in which you might get around that. Okay, I mean, I'm using this at level 6, but as I say, I did turn that down. The way you might get around that is using larger tools. So I'm expecting, for example, this to require more heat than this, so a higher setting than this, because it's a bigger surface area. So that would be one way around it. So when it's turned right down, some of the larger tools. The replaceable tips like this, because you would lose some of the power, I would imagine would again help to keep it cooler. The other thing I might suggest is this one's got a heavy duty cord on it, but this other one has a. He says I've just got it wrapped around the tripod. This one is a standard. Actually, I've got it the wrong way. This is a heavy duty cord. This is a standard duty cord. Use the standard duty cords. They're a lower gauge, and they will have a slightly higher resistance, which will cause the tips to take less current. And the only other thing I can think of is these are really, I mean, these are low voltage, 1.5, I think it's 1.5 volts on here, but no more than 3. They are safe to touch. If anybody that's familiar with electronics, they could create a unit which goes at one end or the other with a very low value of resistance, and I don't actually know what that value would be, but very low, in the order of like a 1/10 of an ohm or even less. But if it was inserted in the circuit, then that would draw away effectively some of the voltage, some of the current, and some of the heat, because these are not constant current, these are constant voltage devices. So the way that works means that if you can put a resistance in series, you will lose some of the heat off the tip. Okay, ballpoint one. Yeah, I suppose I can sort of see that. Fixed tip pens, yeah, I mean the fixed tip pens, that's why I like the fixed tip pens, to be honest, because there's less of a heat loss. The heat loss, by the way, is some people like Lizard Solar, who's noticing it because of what he wants to use it for. I notice it just because I'm familiar with the tools, but for burning wood, both burning wood, for doing this work on wood, it's not particularly significant. I just prefer the fixed tip tools myself. Yeah, well, the reason, of course, for the heavy duty cables is they don't heat up. I mean, the cable, it's actually, the lighter the cable, the more resistance it's got for any given length, and therefore you will lose some power across it. It will warm up slightly, and this is slightly warm, by slightly warm I mean, well, how can I say, you can hardly tell. It's not going to melt, it's not going to burn anything, it is just slightly warm. It's a bit like putting gloves on and putting your hand in a glove. It feels slightly warm, type of thing. I'm just trying to illustrate the effect. But the light duty cable will get slightly warmer. Again, not particularly significant, but may just be enough for you with your wax work and stuff like that. So it's worth trying. But as I say, the other one is, but it would have to be really low resistance. Or my guess is that you void your warranty, I guess. But my guess is that they've replaced that very little variable trimmer in there with a fixed value one. It's probably still got this space on the circuit board, and if you have somebody who's familiar with it, or yourself who's familiar with it, you may be able to replace it. But as I say, at that point, of course, you've voided your warranty. So yeah, okay. I don't know. It may be something that's Italy. As I say, I got mine in the UK. Okay, it's 3 years ago, and obviously there's a difference now. You know, regulations change and things. So it may be something that's unique to the country that you're buying it from. Yeah, it is. Yes, that's right. They do have the extra flexibility. To be honest, I've got one of each here. I don't really notice it. I know they cite it as a benefit of the lighter duty cables, and I know for the heavy duty pens they suggest heavy duty cable. I kind of don't see why, because the heavy duty pen is just a thicker body, really. I suppose maybe the contacts inside it are slightly thicker. Sorry, the wires, you know, these wires that come out of the ends. I'm assuming that they go all the way up inside the pen, although I don't actually know. Can't actually see through the slots, and I've never taken the pen apart to find out. Actually, I can see one there. So yes, I think these wires just go all the way up until they connect it to the socket at the top. So I don't actually quite understand why a heavy duty pen requires a heavy duty cable, other than the expectation that a heavy duty pen doesn't get as warm, therefore you're using it for longer, therefore the heavy duty cable doesn't rob as much of the heat ish. Sorry, I'm trying not to get technical, but I'm trying to keep it in a accessible language. But that's, you know, it's not. I don't find it that significant at all. Yeah, that's probably all it is. I've just got used to it. It's probably the first time I used it. I'll have preferred one over the other. But to be honest, I know I've got one of each here, and I can't actually tell which one's which. Okay, it's labelled. I can tell which one's which. This one's the heavy duty cable. I can sort of feel the difference here, but it actually says HD on here, heavy duty, and then some manufacturing information, and I'm guessing sort of. Let's pull this one on. Oops, a daisy. That end just came off there. I suppose. Yeah, I can feel this one here is less flexible, but to be honest, as I say, hadn't really noticed. I happen to be using the light duty one at the moment. That's just coincidental. I didn't actually choose it. It just happened to be the one that I plugged this tool into. Well, countries are the same. I don't, you know, it may, as you say, maybe. I mean, Italy is, you know, it's Europe. European regulations change, so Oh, and by the way, William, welcome. Good evening. That's all right. Enjoy playing with your dog. Man, it's not mandatory to watch streams. Or at least I'm glad it's not mandatory to watch streams these days. Okay, thank you. Well, as I say, you just be careful as well. Sometimes regulations are often there for a reason. So it's there will probably be some safety aspect involved in it. Possibly by the fact that you not only can you turn it down, you can turn it up, so it may well overrate the tips, or not overrate them rather, but make it so they get hot enough to to do something that isn't expected, and that may be something about it, something like that. Okay, I shall go back to doing this, otherwise I'll spend the rest of the stream talking without actually doing anything. I know both of mine are red covers. I really don't believe I've got two heavy duty ones. I might have to. I mean, I've had them now, I say, 3 years, so it could well be that they've changed, or it could well be that I did get two heavy duty ones and I'm talking a load of rubbish and have forgotten about it. But given that I've got a light duty pen and a standard pen and a heavy duty pens, so I know this came with the machine. I can't really, I'm sort of thinking, why would they've supplied a light duty tip pen with a heavy duty cable? But I don't actually know. So you could be right, sir. You could be right, and I could be completely wrong. I keep forgetting actually you can use this for wax work, and I mentioned earlier on the stream potentially using it for 3D print in 3D printing for smoothing off prints or something like that. But I keep forgetting about wax, which is really silly because my wife makes wax candles, and whilst we don't carve them at the moment, this would do the job of carving or smoothing or just generally affecting the wax. So I keep forgetting about that. I'll have to try it one of these days. They're versatile little devices are these. Yeah. No, that's true. It doesn't really matter. Not quite sure I understand your last statement there, Liz, itself, about being attentive enough to possible issues. Yeah. No, just the same. I've just read about it, and if you got a tool and it or whatever, it's nice to be able to sort of say, well, I'd just like to try it, and just see. Given that my wife has enough wax around the place, I could quite easily have a play at some point. I mean, the daft thing is, I've got a set of hand chisels. I can use them on candles as well because they're sharp enough to create really nice clean cuts. Paper. Not tried it with. Well, I have tried it with paper. Just thinking. I mean, generally speaking, I don't, because I do the paper thing as kind of like now. This is just photocopy paper, and and I'm burning through it, and I know it's really hard, but if I turn this tool right down, I guess. But I actually find this thin paper really difficult to do it on. I've tried it not turned right down, but down a little bit, and it's just it's kind of an all or nothing. But what I do have is really thick paper here, and which is almost thin card, and this reacts more like the wood does, and I can actually shade here like this, and I'm doing this in the wrong way, but I can actually shade with it, and I can hold it longer to get darker shades. And if I turn the tool down, I'll have more control. This is very similar to it being turned up too much on wood. It goes dark really quickly, and I have to move fast to get light marks. But I can actually do it on this paper. This is actually heavyweight wall lining paper. A roll of that, about 60-meter roll, maybe about 60 meters, for about 50 pence. That's half a UK pound. That's probably about 75 cents, or about 60 euro cents. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I don't think it would actually be overheating. It just gets slightly warmer. I mean, to be honest, this connector here is warmer than the cable is, just because it's there is a slight resistance in all connectors, and this one sometimes is warm, just depending just on how good the contact is. They're not perfectly circular, so sometimes just the way you plug it in, sometimes it makes a better contact. This gets warm, like I'm going to say, if you just got a fresh cup of coffee, it's quite, that's hot, possibly uncomfortable to hold. Imagine that's been stood for about 15-20 minutes, so it's gone down to about half the temperature. That's the most this actually ever gets to. You can hold it quite comfortably. Well, this is just slightly warm. The cable is a heck of a lot cooler than that, and there's no way you burn yourself on it at all. It's just warm. Whereas the tip, I wouldn't like to touch that. Power tool stuff, but yeah, it's interesting. Is power tool stuff, because and hand chisel. Yeah, hand chisel. Tell you what, let me just put that tool down since we're talking about it, and I'll turn it off so I don't burn myself. And I'll pick my keyboard up, which I've just knocked on the floor. I'll show you. Hand tools. Oh, there they are. These are Flex Cut, which is an American manufacturer, but there's a manufacturer of excellent tools which is in Switzerland, whose name I've forgotten, and there's another European one as well. But if I just get one of the gouges out, ow, gotta be careful, these things are sharp, with a handle, so these just plug into the handle. So that's the hand tools that I was using. Obviously they're not meant to for percussion, so you don't use these with a mallet. You can get handles for these tools where you can use them as a mallet, and Flex Cut do make large chisels where you would normally use a large mallet with. And but in terms of power tools, that's an interesting thing. If you're talking about a Dremel, those things are extremely noisy. if we talk about purpose designed tools, let me see if I can plug this one in, because I've got a power tool here which I use for rotary carving. I think this machine's plugged in, and if it is I can do this. Yeah, it is. Now then, let me see if I can run this tool by the microphone. Now I don't know if you, well, I'm guessing you could hear that, and I've put it right by the microphone, so it was probably louder than it would be if I was using it in front of me. I'll just show you the tool that I was doing it with. This is called a micromotor, and that's what a micromotor looks like. There's slight variations on it, but effectively these are what they look like. This takes anything from this size of bit, which is actually a dental tool bit, up to about 1/8 of an inch. This is, I think, 1.6mm shank. That was running at 38,000 RPM, which is faster than your than a Dremel tool runs at. And as you hopefully heard, it wasn't particularly noisy. And as I say, that was about that far away from the microphone when I did that. Even its big brothers with the 1/4 horsepower motors, and a company, for example, that make those is Fordham. A UK company actually. They make micro motors. That happens to be one of theirs. And I've got a big 1/4 horsepower sort of version, what they call a flexible shaft, which isn't much noisier than that either. But then you can get things like this. This actually runs off an air compressor, and a fairly sizable one. This is actually a dental tool, but they use it in labs. This runs at about, I've found it now, I think it's about 360,000 RPM, and it sounds like a dentist drill, to be honest, but it's not particularly loud. And this thing is extremely good at turning wood into sawdust. So there we go. You know, it's the Dremel, for example, is very good to get an idea of whether you like something, but the difference between a Dremel, and I do have one, and that micromotor is significant, shall we say. And the difference between the micromotor and the air tool, again, is a big jump. If I was using the Dremel on something, you know, I'm just simulating. So I've got the Dremel, and it's quite a big tool to hold, and I'm trying to do something. It will tend to grab and skip, and it's quite hard to hold in place. The micromotor, because it runs faster, is a lot easier to control, but the air tool, I can move it however I like. It's as though it's, you might have heard the English saying, like a hot knife through butter. It kind of is, but you just have to realise it doesn't cut deep. So with the faster the tool, the shallower the cuts that you make, and you have to take your time. But you know, for that you get extremely versatile tools. And I'll just catch up on the text in chat. I do ramble on a bit, don't I? Let's have a look. Try thicker paper. Yeah, saying paper. Try thicker paper or thin card. It's got a lot to do with that. Or put the make sure you've got the paper on. I wouldn't use it on a desk, but on scrap wood, or even metal, because what will happen is that will conduct the heat away from the tool. You know, you saw me burn through this, and I don't want to put it down on any of these pieces of wood and do it. But if I put it on the piece of wood and did it, it wouldn't be as fast to burn through, because the wood or the metal underneath will conducts the heat away from the tip, and there isn't as much left to heat then to burn through the paper. So that might be something that's worth you trying. Just a scrap piece of wood perhaps, in respect of that. If it's thin paper, the thicker the paper the better. Yeah, the smell of burning paper is a bit more obnoxious than the smell of burning, well, of heated wood, shall we say. Even if you get it to the point of smoking, I find it a more pleasant smell. Other people, and my wife's one of them, finds it more acrid, but she still finds it better than burning hair or something like that. Yes, it may well do. Something like a computer fan, though. You have to get in fact, you probably don't want anything really big. Just like a small computer fan, or the sort of thing that like a USB fan might do that job. Yeah. My difficulty in advising on tool brands would be I've only ever used the flex cuts, so I don't know about other manufacturers what their tools are like. I would say it is worth paying for quality tools. There are in hobby shops. Actually, I've got one around here. I got some given to me for a Christmas present. Yeah, I'll show you. Because of that, I persevere with them. But I'll just show you some things here. I got a set of chisels given to me as a Christmas present from my wife, actually. So now these, actually I haven't tried those, but these chisels, they kind of look like they should be good, but they're blunt. I have spent quite a few hours trying to sharpen these, and they're still blunt. To the point where I won't use them for carving yet. I think I can probably sharpen them enough to be able to carve with, and I want to do that because they were a present, and I'd love to be able to use them. And the actual fact, I'm just looking at the edge on this, and it's actually not a straight edge, and it should be. So I want some more polishing, some more sharpening. Dull tools, it's called, or unsharp tools, are dangerous, especially these sorts of things. You require too much force and they don't cut the wood cleanly. You can ruin your piece, and the force using tools like this means that you'd have no control over them. They go in all sorts of directions, and you can actually hurt yourself quite significantly. So I mean, these were, if you like, about €10 for this set, and probably with the one underneath. I've not tried the set underneath actually. I must do that. But the intention, the manufacturer's intention of this set that's underneath is that they're used for close, fine detail, I guess, because of the style of it. These being what they call palm tools, are intended to be used for more heavy duty work, which is very much like the flex cuts that I showed you a little while ago. So cheap, yes, but basically unusable. And the sad part about it is people get these, probably don't understand that, and so they're actually using a blunt tool and won't enjoy it. There's something enjoyable about using a tool that really cuts wood well, and then they're sort of put off, and it's down to the tool. I know there's this statement about workers blaming the tools, a bad worker blames the tools, but there is a point at which a bad tool is the cause of bad work, and unfortunately it should perhaps be a bad worker doesn't recognise bad tools. But again, that's beginners don't know enough to be able to recognise it, and that's the sad part. So it is worth getting good quality tools, and it doesn't take much time just looking around on the internet to maybe it's some of the forums, woodworkers forums, and you'll actually pick up on who they are, who the good manufacturers are. As I say, I can't remember the Swiss one. I keep wanting to say something like Kiel or Feel or something like that, but I don't actually know who it is. But I haven't tried their tools, and so ethically I can't really recommend them or otherwise. But as I say, I can recommend styles of tools. So when you start, for example, this is a kit. This kit was probably about €150, but you don't need to start carving. And you can get kits with just 2 tools in it, but a handle, a flat chisel, and probably I'd say one of the gouges, and possibly either this, a U-shaped gouge, either that one or possibly this one. This one's probably more useful. So to start with, these 2. These are probably about €15 a piece. So you've got and the handle's probably about €15. So you're talking about what, €45? It's probably about $50, or about £40 UK for those 3 would be enough to start. Although I would also recommend there's for Flex Cut, they have what's a sharpening system. It's sort of a system by which you can keep your tools sharp, because I've never actually sharpened these. I've had them about 3 years. I've never actually sharpened them. It's more of either a polishing or a honing of the edges. Now admittedly I've probably only got about 15 hours of carving on them, but there's they call it a slip strop, and really all this is a polishing compound, which is a slight abrasive really, and then profiled wood with some leather stropping on there. And the profile wood allows you, when you've got these like V-shaped tools, this is a V-shaped tool. Sorry, that's a U-shaped tool. But it fits, these profiles fit the inside edge, which allows you to sharpen the tools more effectively, or to hone the edges, or I don't quite know how to describe it, because it really isn't sharpening. It's just cleaning up the edge more than anything. And this was, well, 13 UK pounds. That's probably about €15. Worth getting. When I'm carving, I probably use it on a tool when I'm carving with a tool, probably about every 5 minutes, and it is noticeably different after you've polished it to beforehand. So again, that's a little bit more expense, but I believe it's worth it. And sorry, I'm again not keeping up with the chat. Oh, don't worry about it. Yeah, the Dremels are noisy. I don't actually know why Dremels are noisy. You've heard what. I suppose it's down to the cost. They're built to a cost, and the micromotor is a lot more expensive than a Dremel. But yeah, if it's all you've got, then at least it gives you an idea of. I mean, a lot of these things, good tools are expensive. They're an investment, but you kind of don't want to spend a couple of €100 or pounds or dollars on tools when you don't know whether you're going to like it. And that's a difficult dilemma, because sometimes cheap tools mean you won't like it, whereas if you tried a good tool, you might find you do like it. And so, the tips, if you like, being able to start with just a couple of chisels are where you can dip your toe in with a quality tool, which won't ruin your experience. It might expose lack of skill, but you expect that you know as a beginner you expect you don't have the skill, but you won't be failing because of the tool. You'll be failing because of inexperience. But you know you won't be frustrated. You won't be frustrated by that. You know it's the sort of thing you expect. You're not going to go out and carve, a Venus de Milo the first day you pick up a chisel. But with some of those, like I showed you before, you can be the best carver in the world, and those things just won't work. So there is that there, but unfortunately, the things like the micromotors are expensive. But something like a Dremel, it's noisy. To be honest, go out and get a pair of earplugs. Daft as it sounds, you can get them for a few euro cents in either a craft shop or I'm trying to think like a motor, anything that sells like motor repair stuff and stuff like that. Industrial earplugs, or even, to be honest, if you've got a set of headphones, put a set of headphones on, turn the music up, and you won't hear the Dremel, or not as much. And use it. Beware that the better tools have better control, but it gives you an idea to try it and see whether you like that style of work. And you can always upgrade afterwards. That's sort of the nice thing. That's one of the reasons why I have a Dremel. I do model making, so the Dremel I can put in a as you describe it there, drill press, so I can do some of the smaller wood, smaller holes, and some cutting in model making materials and thin metal and things like that, where I don't actually want to go out and buy a big drill press to do that sort of thing, because I just wouldn't have the use for it. But I mean, essentially the micromotor or even the other thing, it's the same thing as a Dremel. It just runs faster, and the speed is what makes it more versatile, shall we say. But you can use other things for I mean, there are even tools, especially with the big Fordhams, where you can actually put a chisel in the end of the tool, and it drives it like a chisel. And you can get converters, so the flex tools that you saw there will go in the end, and they work very well as well. Don't have one, want to get one, but not got so yet. But yes, it is. Without you being able to see them, if you're going to buy them online, it really is worth. If you have to save up, it as I did, to be honest. They're not cheap, but I kind of knew I wanted to get them anyway. But if you have to save up, it is worth doing so. There are dull chisels which you can sharpen, and there's some which those, for example, I just can't get them to take an edge, which is sharp enough to actually work with. I probably will eventually, but as I say, because they were present. But yeah, that's the thing I would say. It makes a big difference. I mean, even when I was carving I don't know if you've seen it. When I was carving this, now this is quite a hard wood. It was. I'm not used to carving wood that has this hardness. This is ash. I normally use a wood that's called basswood, or European lime wood, which is easier to carve than this. And those chisels that I showed of mine, the flex cut chisels, are extremely sharp. I've never cut myself. Well, I was about to say I've never cut myself on them while I've been carving. The only time I've cut myself on them, once I wasn't paying attention. I was waving it around a bit as I talked with my hands, as you probably realise, and I caught the edge of a finger. And actually, the second time I did it was on stream, I was putting the chisels away and I just caught the edge of one of those U-shaped gouges, and literally I felt like I'd just scratched myself, just a little scratch, this sort of thing, and I looked down and I got a drop of blood forming on my finger. They're that sharp. But when I was cutting this out, after about 5 minutes of use, I found myself tearing the wood using a lot more force, and effectively, it wasn't as sharp as when I started, and that's when I start polishing them, and then the difference is significant again. But if you can imagine trying to do that with the bad ones I showed you, they would have trouble cutting balsa wood, which is about the softest wood to cut that you can get. They'd rip it, they wouldn't actually cut it. So that's safety, to be honest. It makes a big difference to have sharp tools. Yeah, I said sharpening system. Sometimes what you don't need to start with, at least, is anything like sharpening stones. They're usually too aggressive, even at several thousand grit. The higher the number of grit, like 4,000, is finer than 2,000. So as you go up, they get finer. But yeah, slipstrop. Other manufacturers possibly call it something different, but it's the same sort of idea. To start with, and especially for light carving, until you've got some practice, stay away from sharpening stones or electric sharpeners or anything like that. You only need something like I showed you. Hello, Willie. What's pretty? The probably the rose, was it? Sorry, I'm not keeping up. 35,000, yeah. Yeah, that's not a lot of difference, is there? I mean, in terms of speed, yeah. Rate it to 38,000 is that micromotor. Yeah, it creeps up on you a little bit, but it is just practice. As you practice, you start thinking, well, it's in when I do some more carving, you might get the opportunity to see it. But for example, when you're carving, the wood makes a crunching or a swishing sort of noise as you're cutting through it, and that changes as the edge dulls off. It doesn't get blunt, but it just dulls off. It's not quite as sharp. The sound changes, and that's one clue that you learn to pick up on. But the other is it just doesn't feel the same. And again, it's feel, it's practice. As you do it, it just doesn't. You find you can feel yourself using more force, and I can't really describe it any more than it just doesn't feel quite right. And at any time it feels it doesn't quite right, sharpen it. It doesn't wear the tools down significantly. It would take several thousand sharpening things to using that kit to even affect the tool, shall we say. So you're not going to wear it away or anything like that. You might with stones, but not with that. It's more of a polishing act. And if you do that and it didn't need it, you'll find it didn't make a difference. If you do that and it did need it, you'll find, oh, hey, that's a lot better, and you've just learnt the skill. Experience, but you pick up on it fairly quickly. It's with carving, for example, the mistakes that you're likely to make are more carving the wrong way with the grain, and you split bits of the wood away that you didn't mean to do, or you end up pushing the wood and sort of not actually cutting it, you sort of tear it. and if you're unlucky, you tear off a bit that you want it to keep. It's a learning exercise. In fact, actually, if you look online at Flex Cut, they do just as an example, not suggesting you buy it or anything like that, and there will be other manufacturers, but they do a 2 chisel kit that comes with a small piece of basswood, which they've already cut a pattern, printed a pattern onto. I think it's of a leaf or 2 leaves, and there's some basic instructions in there that tell you a little bit about how to cut out that piece of that image, that the leaves to actually carve the leaves, and it's okay. It's reasonable, and they've given you the right 2 chisels to do the job with, and it's a good starting point. And of course there are quite a few videos on YouTube of people explaining how to carve. Be a little bit wary, of course. Try and pick up what they're some people are better at explaining than others, and you do occasionally see the person who's thinks that they know what they're doing and would be unsafe for a beginner to do. So there are certain things that for example, you'll see me occasionally. Everybody will tell you, drive a tool away from yourself. So work away from yourself. Always keep your hands behind the tool. As you develop skill, that rule becomes more flexible because you understand more about what the tool's doing and about those safety rules. So it's a beginner's rule. But you will see me occasionally carving this direction towards myself, but I'll be holding the tool like this in 2 hands, and you might notice where my wrists are. They're away to one side, and no matter how I move this tool, I can't actually contact my wrists, for example. And I'm driving the tool with my fingers. Because I'm driving it with my fingers, it can't move very far. What I wouldn't do is drive it with my arms, but even if I do, that's as far as I can get, and I'm trying there, but I can't get any closer than that, so I can't really stab myself, for example. What you'd never see me doing is holding a piece there and using a chisel like this into my fingers. One slip and those chisels are sharp enough to easily go through the skin and possibly bone as well. It wouldn't be very pleasant, to say the least. So again, a skill, as we say, and just experience and things like that. So what else was I thinking of just there? Don't know. That was just came to mind about that particular manufacturer and that kit, and just being a little bit wary of YouTube videos. Best ones are where people are explaining. They're actually doing beginner type explaining videos, and they'll go through that sort of. Generally, though, they're working on big chisels with mallets. Most of the ones that I've seen. But essentially the same things apply. Actually, what came to mind that's worth getting as well. If you can clamp a piece of wood to a desk, if you can't, or sometimes it's just not practical, like when I'm carving here, this is some good stuff to get. It's non-slip mat. Okay, although it says non-slip, it resists slipping. Okay, so it's not truly non-slip. If I put a piece of wood on here and push hard enough, it will slide, and these little bits of carving, as they build up on it, it makes the piece slide easier. But non-slip mat is a good thing. It's just a couple of euros for a large piece, and this is a cut down piece. That's a good thing to get as well. Yeah, a little yes, William, thank you for that. Sorry, I talk too much, and I'm not doing any more pyrography now tonight. But thank you for the compliment about the rust. It was you guys on stream that persuaded me to try painting it as well. I'd never painted a carved piece before. And thank you about the cats. Yeah, it's the sound lizard, as I said. It's part of the experience, and it's part of the things that you just feel. And quite often, it's a case of and especially I suppose as a beginner. And I'm just thinking back of when I started. You don't know what's wrong, but something just isn't right, and just listen to yourself when you think that something's not right. Well, if you think something's not right, it probably isn't. Yeah. Okay. My next thing in rotation is probably going to be some. Once this is finished, and this, I might finish it over the weekend streams, but I'm not sure. We're possibly into next week to do this. There's probably at least a day or two of the body in the background to finish it. So probably about 5 or 6 hours maybe, just depending on how much I talk and how little pyrography I actually get done. My next thing will probably be another scraper board. Now that's going to be about 3 streams, I suspect, just going by. The only experience I've got of scraper board is the one that I did last on stream. I've only done it once, and this, when it comes up, will be my second try at doing it, so don't have a lot of experience to say just how long it will take, but I think probably about 3 streams, and then I might do the carving at that point. I have another art form which I will probably stream on Saturday during the day, which is called Pyrograph, which I started last Saturday. I might just do it as an ad hoc stream on Saturday or Sunday. So it's probably going to be the back end of next week before I do any more carving. But yeah, drop in, ask questions. It's quite all right. And one of the things that I'm doing this for is, well, there's one of the things I'm doing it for is because I'm getting to do more art than I've done in the last 3 years on stream, which is great because I enjoy art. But it's also to inspire you guys, but equally well to to help out anybody like yourself, Lizard, who thinks they might want to try it but doesn't realise, for example, that cheap tools, or overly cheap tools shall I say, are not a good investment, and they can actually be dangerous. So if I can help you guys out to stay safe, and I'm not necessarily the most safest. I mean, I will freely admit that I'm working here on a studio space. It's not the ideal place to carve in. I'm also explaining it on stream. I'm using an extremely sharp tool whilst I'm talking and interacting with you guys. It takes a lot of concentration to do that, and it's not the safest. It would be better if I wasn't streaming. But it's so I could be safer, shall I say? But I believe I am safe enough to at least explain it on stream. And as you watch me carving, there will be times when I'll go silent, and that's because I am concentrating on using a very sharp tool, and I don't want to hurt myself. But that's all part of it, and I enjoy doing it. And it's harking back to when I was a lecturer for a few years. Okay, well, we've now gone on for an hour longer than the end of my stream. I spent the last hour talking and not actually doing anything on stream, so other than perhaps showing off tools. I'm going to close it down for this evening. I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching and has put up with me just talking for the last hour, but I hope it has been interesting to you guys, and the pyrography that you might have seen earlier was interesting. The usual advert comes now, where we say that if you'd obviously like to follow me, you hopefully will get notified when I come back on stream tomorrow or onwards, and But if Twitch is having a problem, you can follow me on Twitter. Details are underneath the stream window, but it's at Zaragonart. The only thing so far the only thing I'm tweeting is the fact that I go live. I don't really intend to do anything else, so you won't be inundated. Stream times tend to be around 8 p.m. UK time, which is 7 p.m. that's 1900 hours GMT, or approximately 3 hours prior to the current time now, wherever you are. I generally go on to about 10 p.m, so I am overtime tonight, a lot later than I normally would stream, so please don't expect it to be 11 o'clock most nights. It's a bit late for me, but I hope I will see you all on stream again, and feel free to drop in, ask questions about anything you see or think I may be able to help you with, and I'll again say thank you and see you all again. Cheers.